Okay. All right, welcome to our first What is Best for Kids interviews. We are lucky to have Jim Crowell from OPEX here today. Let me give you just a quick outline of our intention with these interviews. Basically, we just want to go out to the professionals in the community, and that is fitness professionals, psychologists, people working with kids really in any capacity, and find out what their perspectives are on what is best for kids. And often that's going to apply to what we're trying to do within the movement arena and children. We want to expand our knowledge. We want to keep optimizing. We have to keep learning and finding out more about what other people are doing, what they're thinking, what impacts kids in ways that we might be able to somehow use or put into our system so that we can better serve them. And that's the whole idea here, is just get all the perspectives and for all of us to learn. And so it's very interactive. We want you to ask questions, and I think Jim had mentioned we'll put your questions in there, and if it applies to the moment where if it makes sense for us to answer it at that moment, we will. Otherwise, we will answer them at the end of the webinar.
Jeff and Mickey, did you guys think that you were going to be doing a bunch of public-facing webinars, a couple of years ago? This is probably something new for you guys.
Yeah.
You know what I was hoping I wasn't going to be doing a couple of years ago?
Probably, locked in place probably is what, shelter in place. Yeah.
Anything sheltered in place and publicly speaking, all of those things, my favorites. Jim, could you just give everybody a little background? I mean, people who would maybe see this recording, give background of your experience.
Your illustrious history.
Well, we'll see about that. I like to tell people that my background makes me a little bit of a mutt. So I've been in these different industries. I was a hedge fund trader at one point. I owned a couple of CrossFit gyms at one point. I was a coach for OPEX, OPT back in the day. I see Amanda Goodman on the call. It's awesome to have you, Amanda. And now I work for OPEX and Big Dogs, and I'm helping on the Brand X side of things as well. The biggest reason is because I just think you guys are amazing people. I think the message that you guys have should be much bigger, right? I think that people need to think about how their kids are being raised, how they're coaching kids, what these kids are capable of thinking. I think that kids are actually underestimated a lot. And so I just have frankly, it's a good time for me because I like to see how you guys are spreading that message. And if there's something that I'm pretty good at, it's learning from other really good people and then being able to implement in a usable, formatted system type of a way. So that's kind of why I'm here today. What I do on a day-to-day basis for OPEX and Big Dogs is no longer directly coaching though. So I'm on the business side of both of those businesses. So I teach business and I run the businesses for those companies. So I think kind of my perspective today is going to be a little bit more on the overall system and structure of coaching kids throughout this type of a pandemic time period. And then as things kind of start to open back up, maybe some things to really think about. But I really appreciate you having me on, guys.
Well, thanks for being here. I think the first thing we asking was online coaching.
Yeah, so you've been in the online coaching game for a while, having seen, OPEX's amazing grouping of course offerings, and there's so much that's been online and for quite a good period of time. In fact, how long have So
I started doing online coaching after seeing James Fitzgerald in 2012. And then I came down to Arizona to work with OPT in 2014. So James has been doing it, since maybe prior to 2010 for sure. I don't know the exact date. He's going to kick me for that, but it's been a long time. And so we've seen a lot of things that work, and we've seen a lot of things that definitely don't work. So I think that what we can talk about maybe are some of those principles of what helps different types of people, because adults are certainly different than kids. But some of the things that I've seen working particularly in the kids arena over the last 6 to 8 weeks.
Why don't we jump into some of those?
Yeah, one of the stories that I'm extremely proud of, for number one, is that I'm helping a group called Austin Tennis Academy. They clearly were a completely in-person tennis academy experience. They were on court every day they had 80 full academy members, and then they had hundreds of more kids that played in different levels of tennis training. And I was a tennis player in college, so there's a spot in my heart for tennis. And I've known these Austin guys because I used to live down in Austin when I was trading for the hedge fund. And so I got in touch with them, and we started just to map out, how are you going to deliver the same emotional responses to the kids that you were delivering on the court? And so it's not just about the physical, though they are certainly working physical training as well as strokes, so they are teaching technique online right now. But I think one of the biggest things that they had a lot of success with is that they didn't lose rhythm and purpose. So these kids were really excited about getting better at tennis, enjoying the time with their friends, learning the game, et cetera, et cetera. And they're called ATA, so I'll just refer to them as ATA. ATA did a really, really good job of taking that purpose of improving themselves and moving it online. So a big principle to me when you go online is that you don't want to lose the outcomes of the in-person experience. You simply want to shift the platform that you're delivering the experience on. So I don't, whether it's tennis or fitness or gymnastics or dance, etc., you need to set the expectations that it's not going to look the same, or are the specific physical outcome to be exactly the same, but it doesn't mean that there isn't progress. And in those types of kids who are coming to fitness classes or coming to tennis practices, they can wrap their heads around that. And that's kind of where I get back to, you don't want to underestimate kids, because if you can give them the right context for things, they'll say, oh, got it. Okay, now I understand why we're doing this thing called Zoom. I understand how I'm supposed to develop my own rhythm during the day. I understand how my parents don't have to do this with me for a couple of hours every day, and I can still make progress and enjoy time with my friends. So if I could kind of break down into maybe a first principle, it's that you need to continue the emotional growth of what the program was delivering in the first place.
So along those lines then, how much time is allotted for sort of socialization and, hey, how have you been? What have you been up to? And that sort of thing within the construct of instruction.
Great question. So I've seen a couple different groups who have done this very well. Before I hit that, one of the biggest things that I was chatting with Sean Greeley, who's NPE, and he's just said something that was so simple that I think everybody on this call will resonate with. Anybody that you work with online, well, so in person or online, it's really no different, but people need to think about this from an online context right now. Your goal is to increase the value and decrease the barrier of entry. So if you think about it from those two angles, how do I increase the value of, let's call it a fitness program online? That's where you can get creative. And how do I decrease the barrier? Well, the barrier comes in the form of, okay, I have to have a computer or a phone or Zoom, or, I have to be able to get on these calls. Maybe I need a mat or a dumbbell or something like that. How can I, as the coach or the gym owner, support more value at lower barrier? So just principally speaking, that's a big piece that I'm trying to work with a lot of people on right now. In terms of how people are socializing, I'll go back to ATA. They do a lot of that. So at almost all times where they have a Zoom room, and keep in mind, all of the people who are in there, they're still calling it practice. At every practice, every person has their video on, and there's always multiple coaches on those videos. So generally speaking, there's a demoer, right? And then there's a coach who's really watching the whole room to make sure that they are commenting with first names and personally to everybody. So there is a sense of, I'm being heard, I'm being seen, I'm still being coached, and that feels really good. And then on top of that, let's just call it, there's anywhere from, could be 5 to 10 minutes one day up to 30 minutes where they are doing more socialization, game playing. They've played Jeopardy type games. They've done kind of physical activity, just pure games. They've done get to know coaches better, get to know athletes better. It's a big important part, especially the younger the kids, I think.
Well, it's kind of my next question is what age is these this academy? What are their age groups?
Generally speaking, and not always, but generally they are 10 to 18 is where most of these kids fall into. They do have some younger kids, but generally they're not falling into kind of like the big academy practice. When I've spoken to a number of gyms who are working with kids online, the younger the kids, obviously the shorter the video hit most likely needs to be, so you're going in there for 15, 20 minutes probably. You're getting your energy and your physiology nice and high. You're doing a ton of socialization. You're moving them around for a little bit and then you're out, right? Because all you're really trying to do is to get them to associate physicality with something good, right? Because, it's like, you're not going to progress these kids for their football scholarship in 14 years. You're just trying to get them to enjoy what physicality and connection can mean, even if it's through the platform of something like Zoom video.
Yeah, and they can still get all the good benefits of movement, neurologically. It doesn't have to be their best motor patterning development, stage.
Totally.
Right,
and I think, sorry, go ahead.
No, that was it.
Oh,
often, like if you talk about, the younger age groups, ages, 3 or let's say 5 to 10, and then older age groups 10 to 18, kind of that, divide those up. The younger group really in live groups are engaged with the coach. They're very engaged with the coach, while the older group, the preteen teen group, is very engaged with each other and would have less to do with the coach. Like they would like the coach to tell them what they're going to do and then kind of leave the room because they want to interact with each other. So I think if you talk about interaction, that's when you're talking about the young kids, that's very intensive on the coach's part. Like, we're going to do this next. We're going to be involved here. Hi, Jimmy. Hi, this, and we're doing that. Whereas with the older group, it might be more engaging to get the kids working together and interacting really, really between each other on that level.
I couldn't agree more, but I do think in an online setting, the coach plays an incredibly important role just because they have to foster that initial lowering of the barrier to be online. So, for example, let's take a fitness class. There's always going to be a level of competitiveness with two 14-year-old boys, right? Whether it's in push-ups or sit-ups or whatever you're going to do, simple to complex, they're going to watch each other on video. And most likely a lot of those kids, now keep in mind, the longer they've been with somebody like a Brand X, the less likely they are to be, ridiculous with their movement. But they're probably going to start to cut a little corner here and there. The coach has got to be all over that to make sure that they stay in the right, let's just call it reference point, because I do think that there's a little bit more range that you might allow, when you're doing some body weight stuff in an online setting, not because it's okay, but because it's still moving them in the grandiose right direction, right? So I think that you want to try to remove perfection from this type of a group setting environment online, and you want to keep focused on the big stuff, like you guys said, socialization, or like we were talking about with ATA, with purpose and rhythm, right? One of the big things you also want to do is you also want to make sure that you're consistent enough where these kids keep showing up, right? So you have to provide a level of accountability, not just for the kids, but also so that the parents know that they have a time on their schedule where they don't have to be in front of the kids. So one of the things we hear about from our coaches, now keep in mind the bulk share of the work that we do is with adults, right? But a lot of these adults are just wrecked because they're working 24/7 right now. They're with their kids 24/7 right now. It's a lot of work. Now, I don't have kids, so I don't actually understand this. I'm just hearing it, and it sounds really difficult. So I think that it's important.
One of the things we suggested to our training centers when all of this started to happen was maintain your time slots. So if you have a teen class at 4:30 in the afternoon on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, maintain that and hit the parents up. Tell them, look, you got an hour off. This is my hour to work with your kids.
Yes.
And I really felt the ones that have done it have been very successful because the parents need an hour
Yeah.
off.
Talk about, it's one of the two sides, right? Incredible value. Incredible value. If you can provide an upbeat, energetic environment for these kids for an hour to tire them out a little bit, to get them socializing a little bit more for an hour, that's incredibly valuable to the parents. But the consistency is really important. So like you said, Jeff, the ones who have implemented it well, it's worked well. But the ones who don't have any energy, the ones who aren't commenting individually on the kids in the class, that's what's not working well online right now. And I know that for a fact. So you can't just go online and think it's going to be all butterflies and rainbows. You have to have good sound. You have to be paying attention to everybody in the class. I really like the two coach approach, one demoing and one really paying attention to everybody in the class. And also too, before you get these kids online, you do have to make sure they know how to get online and how to get their camera turned on. But that's lowering the barrier. So Mickey, I keep cutting you off. So please go for it.
No, you're the guest. You want you to answer the question. I was just a couple thoughts while you were talking. Keeping that value and giving the parents a break, that's spectacular. But I'm also thinking about along the lines of habit loops and keeping people in habit loops. And for kids, routine is such a primary thing anyway for them to kind of anchor their lives. And with everything going on now, having the ability to maintain something that they're used to doing and keeping that habit loop so that when things do go back to the new normal, there's a stepping stone there. It's not just a break in what was happening.
Yes.
And yeah, I think that's.
Yeah. No, that's what I mean when I say rhythm. So, on the OPEC side, we would say balance, energy, rhythm, and purpose. Now, I got a little bit more granular with rhythm and purpose because that's so explainable for kids. Right. I remember when I was a kid, my dad would say balance, balance, balance. I'm like, dude, I don't know what you mean by that. Now I'm 37. I get it implicitly. Right. But I didn't fully understand what that necessarily meant. But rhythm, that can be explained. Let's talk about what a day looks like. I mean, how many kids have ever really had this conversation with somebody? It's like they show up to school because that's what they have to do. And then they've got classes, but nobody's talking to them about what that rhythm helps them do. It's just, it's almost played to them like you have to do this, you have no control in this, and just show up, And I think that a lot of kids, if they're given a little bit more context about this, would say, that's actually not a bad idea. Now obviously it depends on the teacher or it depends on the coach a little bit, but it's really important right now because, and again, I'm hearing this more so from adults who have kids, but I keep hearing that those people who have developed schedules and organized their days are having a much better experience with this whole COVID-19 thing. And that has gone across a lot of socioeconomics as well. So people who got a ton of cash and people who don't, I still think that that's really important to develop rhythm where you can get it.
One of the things we talked with training centers about, and I think it's very important, was that, okay, so now we're in this new normal. Your kids need to have, call it rhythm, I have a schedule kind of thing. But the idea was, get your kids up. What did they do during the day? They got up, they got to take a shower, they ate breakfast, then they, went to school. So if you're going to do homeschooling, they get up, they take a shower, they eat breakfast, you all put your backpack on, you walk around the block once. And that's your, I'm walking to school, come back in, now you've got a little bit of exercise, gotten outside, a little bit of sunshine, hopefully, and, you start your day. And then having a schedule. Don't just say, okay, we're sitting down, we're going to do homework for 4 hours. We're doing this for a couple hours. Now we're going to stand up, we're going to do X, Y, Z. And it's not going to be plopped down in front of the TV, but have some activity that we're doing so that we are getting movement throughout the day, because that's so problematic now from what we're seeing. And it really, what we're hearing from people is kind of what you're saying, the two groups. One group that has a nice schedule going on, another group that's kind of just playing it by ear. And it's move from the table where they're doing homework for 4 hours. Now they're watching TV and playing games, and then back to the homework. and they're having, you know, real problems. So,
Yeah, and I'm not a parent, so I don't deeply understand this, but I'm extremely empathetic to parents and, you know, the coaches working with parents, because they're under an intense amount of stress. You know, they have to do all of their work from home while they have all these distractions. That's difficult to do. All I've got is a dog, right? Like my wife is downstairs, she's working. Neither one of us bothers either one of us, right? You know, so I'm sitting in basically a quiet house, unless the dog goes berserk, which is 50-50 at all times. But, right? But I think when you're thinking about the parents as a coach, you need to look at the perspective of the kid and the perspective of the parent in all of this as well. So what you're trying to create is a way for the parents to also have a better experience. So not only is it the hour, but I would tailor some of the emails that I'm sending out, not just for the kids, but for the parents. And I don't mean like, you know, virtue signaling how they should be perfect parents. I'm not talking about that at all. I'm talking about an email to the parent that says, hey, you know, here are some great things I've seen other parents doing that are benefiting them. Talk about value, right? Like, I know that if you get a kid to show up and have fun doing fitness, whether it's for 15 or 30 or 45 or 60 minutes, that's going to be beneficial for the coaches who have built relationships with them. I know that. But the parents are still going to face a lot of stress as well. And if you can help the parents a little bit, and again, you're not trying to force them to do things, that will make them stay a lot longer. And just to give you everybody on the call context, I'm a financials guy. I want these kids to stay a long time, and I want them to pay you more money. Like that, like, let's be realistic here. Like, that's what we're trying to figure out. And I know that everybody on this call wants to do the right thing for kids. I'm 100% certain of that. I just want you to make more money doing it. So I think if you can develop value to everybody in this whole proposition, kids, parents, etc., you will have a lot more opportunity to retain these kids for longer, even if you're forced to go no classes for a couple of weeks while you're trying to figure out online and da-da-da-da-da. One of the things that worked really well for us on the OPEX and the Big Dog side is that we were able to get online easily. You know, that's part of kind of how our model works. The gyms who weren't kind of had to make a decision. Am I going to do something online or not? I think that the gyms who went online, yes, there's probably difficulties. No, they're not going to beat Peloton and all these other big ass companies. However, they are making a big effort to their clients, and most of those clients are rewarding them with at least charity for a month or two until this thing starts to calm down or until they figure out how to do online better. So I think that you've got to kind of make your decision to put a massive effort in, because there's no vaccine for at least 18 months. The antibody thing, we don't really know yet. So we have a number of months where people are going to be needing to do some version of social distancing. That's no different for kids. I understand they're technically less vulnerable, but parents are not going to let their kids get into, you know, potentially dangerous situations. And you have to make sure that you're doing everything in your power to deliver a great experience every day. If you do that, people are going to give you the benefit of the doubt right now, but they're not going to do that 6 months from now or 12 months from now. But if you can build up kind of social capital, they will retain inside of your gyms.
We had a question from Dustin.
Sure.
Oh, I have something to say on that. Go ahead.
Okay. And Dustin was asked, what should we do since this is us with minors on video? Heard some things about making sure to protect us.
Dustin, awesome question. I'm the first one to always make this statement. I'm not a lawyer. You need to make sure that you speak to your lawyer. But what we would definitely encourage you to do, notice my language of hedging myself out of liability, is I would highly encourage you to create a secondary waiver that explicitly says that the parent is allowing the kid to be a part of these classes, though it's through an online platform called Zoom. I'd be extremely explicit with it, meaning this is how we're doing it. This is the platform it's on. Here's how we're going to deliver the class. If they're perfectly happy to sign that and your lawyer says that that protects you, awesome. If not, then I don't think that I would do it. And I know that that potentially blows up revenue for a little bit, but that's too big of an asymmetric downside risk that I don't like.
I recently saw that Zoom was going to an encryption system by the end of May. And I don't know if that solves the problem, but it would be something to investigate to see if it offers more protection and maybe more security for a parent signing the kind of waiver that Jim's talking about.
Yep, and again, I'm not making any legal claims here, but as far as I know, as long as you're extremely clear in a legal contract way that says we will be using Zoom, etc., if they accept that, that now makes you a lot more protected, even if something were to happen with Zoom.
It's a good question.
Yep.
So I have another question, just to move on here a little bit. Coaching kids should be entirely different than coaching adults, just biologically, psychologically, socially. Just it seems like such an obvious thing, although we see so many people applying adult things to kids. Because of that, what do you see as the most important aspect of that specificity in design?
Are we talking program design or the design of an online setting, or
in an online setting, program
Okay.
design within an online setting?
One of the things that I think is actually fairly universal, whether it's kids or adults, is the acknowledgement of the human. Meaning, I think it's extremely important to single people out by name when you go online. Now, I'm not saying signal out a kid and say that they're doing a shit job. I'm saying single them out and say, awesome job, Johnny, incredible form. You know, it's like, it's those types of interactions, which I'm a believer that if you're in person, there's more energy. There's just an energy between people. I think that it's tough to argue that, but you can create a decent amount of that percentage of connection if you connect via words and body language, right? So one of the reasons why I try not to just be, you know, ho-hum and, you know, bad posture and the whole 9 yards when I'm on a podcast or a webinar like this is because you will start to draw off of my lack of energy. What I've seen in the online setting is that people who do it really well, they have a physiology that's up, right? I mean, you guys have seen James going off, right, on webinars. I mean, he's super passionate about it. That's James Fitzgerald for some of you guys who might not know him, but he's super passionate about these topics. And when he gets into a topic where he's super passionate about, he's on fire. But if I were to make him do a webinar on accounting, disaster, because he just doesn't give a shit about it. Like, that's why I exist in the OPEX ecosystem, right? Like, that's not what James wants to talk about. And he built a good enough business that could put somebody like me into that role. So I think that when you have a class setting online, you have to be the one that leads the energy of the group. You have to be the one that is the most connective of each individual person to person. If you know that some kids are maybe a little bit more competitive and you're cool with the level of competition between them, I think it's perfectly fine to kind of notice it here and there between two kids, as long as you're connecting yourself to the people and connecting the people to one another. I don't think it's different than an in-person setting. I just think that it takes a little bit more maybe imagination, because you're kind of creating all of that without the human energy of being, you know, kind of next to one another.
We just a quick little story associated with what you're saying. We had some siblings in the last class, and I got the backstory from mom later. There are two situations, but that there was some competitiveness because the little boy kind of stormed off, and I didn't know why. I just had to, you know, keep going, talking everybody through it. But I noticed he left, and it was at the time that they were balancing books on their heads and squatting. And little sister had a ponytail. And that helped backstop her book.
Yes.
And so it was easier for her, and he got furious. And I found that out later and thought it was so funny that they had this little interaction, and all you saw was that one of them left the room.
We had the second story, which was another pair of siblings, two brothers that were no more than a year apart. There was a book involved in the workout, and Mickey said, "Get your book." And then the next thing we saw is the little square with the brothers is the younger brother standing there dutifully with his book, while the older brother took the book and smacked the older brother upside the head. I of course burst out laughing
So-
because I
Oh,
generate
yeah.
teens.
Don't touch anybody else.
Don't touch anybody else with your book.
That's so funny. The story about the brother and sister, that could have been a spitting image of me getting pissed if I recognized that my sister had an advantage back in the day. That, like, I would not have been able to wrap my head around that kind of an advantage. It would have driven me nuts.
Jim out there trying to get his hair in a little ponytail.
Right. Yeah.
Um, so do you have any other principles or things we should be looking at for on?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that's very top of mind for me right now, keep in mind OPEX has gyms around the world, is I just wrote up a really beefy reopening procedures for OPEX gyms. And I think that it's probably relevant across the entire fitness ecosystem. And I suspect that most everybody who would be on this call is more used to coaching people in person. So I think it's important for us to just kind of talk back and forth, for a couple of minutes on that. And then truly anybody in the chat box, ask questions about this, because that's coming down the pipeline in most major cities, probably in the next 2 to 4 weeks, is some level of removing some of the lockdown procedures that are in right now. And the context that I kept coming back to, and Carl Hardwick, who is OPEX's COO, wrote it with me, and we kept coming back to, you have to create a safer environment. And if you don't do anything tangibly to create a safer environment, you have to recognize that you are certainly putting yourself into a trade-off situation that has increased the probability of a problem. Now, I'm not going to say if somebody is or isn't going to get the virus. I'm just saying that you're creating a higher probability that you're going to have a problem at some point, whether it's parents walking in and moving the virus around or whatever. You have to create a safe environment, and then you have to project that safety out to your clients, be it kids or parents. You also have to get buy-in from your coaches before you ever open doors. So kind of how does that thing really play out? At the end of the day, it has to be blueprinted out. And then when I say blueprint, I mean a step-by-step customer experience that you have to create every single time human beings walk into your facility. So when somebody opens your front door, you need to know exactly what happens and exactly what doesn't. And you need to make sure that every single human that walks in that door goes through your fun house, meaning goes through your exact process of getting into the gym, getting into their spot, training, having a good time, and getting out. Because you can't have the same hanging out effect that you did 2 or 3 months ago, because inevitably that will lead to less distancing, and it will create the probability of the virus spreading inside of your gym. Now, I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole of what's right or wrong. I'm not going to try to make decisions for people, but when you do decide to open, that is absolutely critical, is creating a process and a cleaning procedure that is epically good. I mean, epically good. I think that the cleaning process starts kind of in 2 places. Well, maybe 3. The facility has to be disinfected often. Okay, that's number 1. And that often means multiple times per day. Second, though, the clients, whether it's parents or kids, have to clean their spots. Okay, they got to make sure that they are cleaning it. And then the third, and this is, maybe it's my opinion, I would do this if I still own gyms. I would make sure that the expectations set up front with every parent and every kid is that they come in with hand sanitizer and wipes of their own. That's not a cost savings to the gym. That's I don't want you grabbing towels and spray bottles and all kinds of other stuff that's going to spread germs. Okay, so again, to go back to value and lowering the barrier, you need to set up these expectations today, and you need to set up your facility to handle these things today, so that whether you open in 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 12 weeks, your facility is ready every single time somebody walks through that front door. And this has got to be put down on paper. It's got to be role played with all of your coaches. It has to be perfected. And I'm being really serious with that word perfected, because even if you set the right expectations for parents and kids, you know that there are going to be variables and volatility moments in this, and your staff and you have to be able to handle those moments professionally. So most people who are going to create problems for themselves are just going to be massively underprepared. And so when I wrote a checklist, it was scary to some folks, but we had about 3 or 4 pages of checklist just to say that you're ready to reopen. And we were saying to these gym owners, until you've checked every box, we don't think that you're ready to open. And that means setting up different stations so that people are always 6 feet apart. That means setting up your programming so that you don't have kids or adults moving into one another. You know, so think about something like farmer walks across a gym floor. That shit's out, because you can't have people going down, you know, a 400 square foot, you know, path of the gym anymore. And I think that people need to prepare for this now, because again, without a vaccine, this is the new normal for a long time.
I think, Jim, as well, given that you couldn't get a room of 10-year-olds to stay 6 feet apart,
Yep.
this is just not feasible. And if one doesn't listen, you're done. So we think that the online platform, at least for the little ones, will be a little longer lasting until things change a bit more.
It's a great point. There are some folks who have talked to me about actual physical barriers, you know, like, you know, using plyo boxes or whatever. Now, to each their own, and I would much rather people be safe. So I think that you bring up an excellent point. And if you're thinking about staying online, I think what you have to do is you have to set longer term objectives, right? I don't think that just showing up for a daily class is good enough after about 4 weeks. I think that there need to be objectives and goals and socialization ideas, and that to me is what programming needs to look like for these moments. You know, it's not about perfecting the lunge walk right now. Now, maybe you might work on technical, you know, range of motion. I think that's wonderful, but kids aren't coming out of this like a 16-year-old kid's not coming out of this with like a 60-pound back squat PR. You know, well, maybe they will if you're in it for 6 months and they grow, right? Like, I don't know, maybe they will, but you know, it's not because of the physical training that they're probably doing, but you can do a lot of great stuff mentally, emotionally. You can do a lot of great stuff socially. You can do a lot to take the stress off of both the kids and the adults. And I think that you need to set those objectives and make them public for the kids and the parents, because that creates purpose, right? It's like, I'm showing up because I'm working on these big things. I'm excited for it. I get to hang out with my friends, and I couldn't do this in any other place. So make it a positive experience that is longer lasting than just the, you know, 30 or 60 minutes that the kids are on a call.
That's great advice. I like that. Can we ask you a few tie-up questions? These are going to be standard throughout our series
So
here.
let's ask first to see if anybody has any questions for Jen before we do our tie-up questions.
Yes.
Anybody here have any questions they'd like to ask? Then we'll barge into our...
You guys are quiet.
Yeah.
Okay, sports as a kid.
Ooh, I also a mutt. I played basketball, baseball, soccer, tennis, golf when I got a little bit older. I ran because I liked it, but not formally.
But that's the mixture.
That's the prescription.
You got the magic.
But notice I didn't have much power in there, and that has clearly played out over the rest of my athletic career.
But I feel like you know somebody who might be programming that.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
How about your play history? As in,
got home from school, what'd you do?
Yeah.
Oh man, I would kill to go. What were they called back in the day? Not play dates, but I would kill to get that note from my mom that said I could jump on the bus with a buddy of mine and go hang out at their house and, do anything, right? I'd like go run around in the woods. I mean, I did enjoy video games, you know, but it's like whatever we felt like doing, we would do. A funny story, actually. Somehow I developed a reputation in school of having like I was one of the kids that was supposed to be super imaginative, you know, so I always got asked to go on to future problem solvers or whatever, but I never seemed to fit the bill of what they were really looking for. And I can remember a specific story. Gosh, I couldn't have been more than 11 or 12 years old or something. And they put me in one of these groups, and they gave me this scenario of, okay, talk to us about, you know, how you would, you know, create a positive situation. I just remember I was like, okay, I would parachute down into the water and I would do all this crazy stuff. And they just looked at me like, what's wrong with you? And I just thought about it. I was just like, but you gave me this open scenario and then you didn't allow me to just stay in the open scenario. And in all reality, guys, that stuck with me for probably 15 or 20 years. And I was pretty contrarian about school type groups because I was like, they don't actually want me to be myself. They just want, you know, to put me into a bucket. And I didn't really understand it, but it's fascinating to think about all that stuff. And so like for me, when I played, I like to be imaginative, you know, and even though you guys know me as black and white, like, you know, metrics have to make sense and blah, 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 blah. I'm sure that was kind of based partially on some of that school activity.
Very good.
That's awesome.
What is your best memory of your play days?
Oh, play days. Oh, you know what? I used to love, so I grew up in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan. I was born in Detroit, and we lived in this cool neighborhood that had a couple different areas of woods. And so I loved being able to go through the different outlets in and out of the woods with my buddies, whether it was through bikes, you know, on little trails, or I'd kill for that. I just love doing that.
Awesome.
That's fantastic. It's good.
We got one question from Heinrich, it looks like. What would be an example of good and realistic long-term goals applicable to online trainings and youth?
Yeah, the biggest things that I've found success with, and that a lot of our coaches have found success with, particularly with kids, is creating really good habits that they can feel are tangibly happening day by day. You know, so if you as a coach have good conversations with the kids in your class, and I think that this should be one-to-one at some point, right? But if you know some of the things that they're interested in, you can really help them build good habits to grow into that thing. And I'll give you a quick story. Like, I used to think that I hated reading. And ultimately what I hated was that when I was in kindergarten, I got put into the slow reading group. And that just, you know, like you guys can probably tell I'm a bit of a competitor, and, you know, it's like that really pissed me off inside. And so I just said, I don't like reading for a lot of years. Had somebody changed the context for me, you know, first, second, third grade, from the act of reading to the idea of learning and exploring and understanding, I probably would have had a completely different understanding of what reading meant. And I think that as coaches, yes, it might take a little bit of extra time right now, but I think it's a really important idea to help kids understand, what are you curious about? You know, what do you want to do? What do you want to learn? What are the things that you love doing? And creating good habits where they can just go explore that idea. Now, that exploration might not be going to an aquarium in this moment, but they can certainly, I mean, imagine what YouTube has, and imagine what different books have, or Audible books or whatever. And I think that as coaches, and then ultimately as parents, if we can support those habits, man, that makes a big difference for kids. And then back to Jeff and Mickey's point, that's rhythm, that's consistency, that's, you know, that's growth. It's the consistency that leads to real growth.
Thank you.
For sure.
Awesome. Okay. Well,
sorry, it looks like
Sarah.
Sarah just asked a quick question. She said, I've tried to implement virtual partner workouts with my older class, and they seem to really enjoy the interaction. However, it gets a bit clunky as far as kids yelling go to their partner. Do you have any suggestions on how to make this more efficient or social games that you recommend? Sarah, do me a favor in the chat box. When you say partner workouts, are you literally saying that they like slap 5 to a partner, or they have to say on Zoom, go to their partner, like they have to verbalize it?
Also, the exact age you're talking about would be helpful.
And if we don't, okay, the wave at their partner. Got it. And so they just get fired up, and so they, because they want to win, they start yelling at the screen. I definitely get that. I would probably do that as well as 12 to 14-year-old.
My first,
yeah, go for it, Jeff.
As a question, and I'll let you. Sarah, is the yelling disruptive anybody else? That'd be my first question, because if it's not, then it's part of being 12 to 14 years old, and I would let them. Part of the excitement of doing this stuff together, and I know that I worked specifically with preteens and teens, and Mickey would come in sometimes to my class. How do you deal with all of the noise that's going on and all of the sarcasm and the back and forth? And look at her and go like, I don't even hear it. It was just LA type. But part of that was just, we discussed part of that sarcasm and the way that kids treated each other and back and forth, and the excitement of that was just part of them socially becoming separating themselves and becoming who they are, and that interaction was important to them. So I don't know. I'm asking, is it disruptive? Like things starting to shut down because of it, or is it just something you can kind of look at and go like, oh, the kids interacting with each other?
And do they have their screen on mute generally?
It's funny that you guys said that, because my first thought was going to be, I would give them an amount of time every class to just go nuts.
Yeah, that might be the answer. And if it gets, and then setting up maybe parameters under which, if it gets too loud, because what I would assume is they're getting excited. So you set parameters, things like, the actual hand wave and touch or whatever you do to make them move is the thing that starts the next round. That starts to I'm not hearing it. I'm not seeing the hand wave.
Yeah, I think, Sarah, that's a really good point. I think Mickey brings up a really good point on that. I think when you're doing your blueprint, your strategy for what each class looks like, I think that you want to set aside those times where there are mute, where they are on mute, and you can control that, at the presenter level. You can control everybody on mute or everybody off mute. And then I think, assuming that it's okay for the context of the class, I would let there be times where there might be a little bit of chaos, and that's okay for a couple of minutes.
Yeah, Mickey does class on Friday mornings, and when the kids get on, there's 5 minutes of discussion and talking back and forth with Mickey and the other coaches that are on. And then everybody mutes and we go through the workout. And then at the end of the class, it's opened up and there's that back and forth thing too. That might work with the teens then. Okay, now we're going to start our workout. Everybody mute your mics. Now we're going to head off and workout. We'll unmute and go crazy in 5 minutes when the workout's over.
And something that I've also learned, similar to Jeff, just not even hearing kids losing their minds, is I've done so many Zoom calls over the last 5 years that I barely recognize little blips, if somebody loses connection or something like that, just because I'm so used to it. So I think that probably, the more experiences you have with delays or whatever, it's okay, but try to set up your class to be malleable if a kid does have a little bit of a delay or not.
Or it hits his
Yeah.
brother in the head.
Yeah.
Henrik, you asked if the TBX program for online is only body weight. It was the last 2 months. This month coming up, so we're moving into May now, I will have in the teen class, I'll have a body weight option and a gym option open for people so that they can have, you know, if your gym is in a place where people are opening up, you can go back and you have the gym equipment, standard gym equipment that can be used. But there's also going to be the body weight programming available in the team area.
And for the littles, we're just sticking with props and then things around the house that they can use. We're not really focusing on load anyway. So, you know, like we're using the book, pillows, socks, you know, laundry basket, prowlers, things that are readily available that kids can use. So there's some resistance, but in a limited way. And then we do have our standard programming. So Henrik, if you need more, shoot us a message. We can find other things that are more suitable for what you're looking for.
Heinrich, are you asking about pricing for classes online or pricing for the body weight? Okay. My advice is always start with the current pricing that you're at. The reason why I say that is because it's always harder to go back up in pricing once you've lowered it, even if you go from online back to in-person. Now, of course, there are explanations as to how you can get the price point back higher. However, again, in this moment, if you've built good relationships with the people that you work with, they will give you a little bit of leeway on this. And I've seen it across the board with thousands of clients at this point. So if you are confident in the value that you're creating, keep in mind there are constraints. That price point, in my opinion, should stay.
That is what we've heard as well from most people that have spoken to us about is that's what they went with, and that their clients have been comfortable with that.
Yeah, it's not gonna last forever, right? Yeah, so like we'll have to keep looking at this thing, you know, every couple of months for sure. But hopefully we can get more testing capabilities, a better antibody understanding. Vaccines not coming for a while, but you know, we will start coming out of this thing, and we'll have to see what happens when we do.
Have we answered all the
think
questions?
we're done.
We have more.
I think we're done.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your really valuable time, Jim. We always appreciate every little nugget. So,
no, I appreciate it too. Thanks for having me on, guys. And if anybody ever needs anything, you know, they can come find me. You know, I'm just Jim at opexfit.com. I think I have a brand X email, don't I? But most of it's just going through OPEX. But
yes,
anyways,
yes, you have a brand X email.
yeah.
Awesome. I'm trying to make my life efficient by going through one spot.
But I think it all filters to OPEX Fit.
Cool. Well, thanks for having me on, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
And thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you.
See you guys.
Talk again soon.